A powerful tornado swept through the rural countryside, leaving destruction in its path. A solitary black truck driver seeking shelter happened to hear a faint cry out in the fields. He discovered an overturned trailer with 2 men and a young girl trapped inside. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed in, rescued them, and got them to safety. When emergency crews arrived, he quietly slipped away, unaware that a nearby security camera had captured the entire event and that the man he had just saved was a state senator. The sky over eastern Oklahoma had been holding its breath all afternoon. Thick, sunless clouds hovered low, casting long shadows over the wide, open fields of tilled soil and rust-colored barns. The horizon, normally a wide canvas of calm, was shrinking under the weight of the storm brewing in silence. Birds had vanished. The air, though still, was electric with tension, as if the land itself could sense something was coming. On a narrow 2-lane road stretching between nothing and nowhere, a large Peterbilt 389 rumbled softly, its engine a deep, steady growl beneath the hum of an old country station playing faintly through the static of the dashboard radio. Inside the cab sat Deshawn Carter, 35 years old, dark-skinned, soft-minded, with a kind of face that carried weariness and wisdom in equal measure. His hands were strong, calloused, one resting on the wheel, the other cradling a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee. His jeans were faded, his boots scuffed, and his shirt, buttoned up to the collar, worn clean but threadbare at the sleeves. Deshawn didn't talk much, not to strangers and not even to himself. But when he did speak, people listened, not because he was loud, but because he meant every word. He lived a quiet life, spent mostly behind the wheel of his 18-wheeler, driving freight between Missouri and Texas. No wife, no kids, just the road, the sky, and memories he didn't invite but couldn't forget. His parents had died when he was 14. Car accident on a rainy night, and since then he'd learned early how to fend for himself. The state shuffled him between foster homes like paperwork in a broken system, and by 17 he'd slipped out into the world unnoticed and untouched. He'd been a firefighter for a few years in Tulsa, back when he still believed in rebuilding what the world tried to destroy, but left after a rescue went bad and no one, not even his own crew, stayed behind to help. Since then, he'd stuck to hauling freight, finding solace in solitude, and building a quiet code. Keep your word, do your job, and if someone needs help, you help. That code was all he had, that and the truck. The Peterbilt wasn't just his vehicle, it was his home, his office, and in a way his last tether to something solid in a world full of storms. Its dashboard was decorated with nothing but a small cross dangling from the rearview mirror and a photo, increased and fading, of a little boy in a yellow raincoat, a nephew he hadn't seen in years. On good days, Deshawn smiled at that photo. On days like today, he just kept his eyes on the road. As he drove through the gentle curves of the countryside, he noticed the wind starting to change. It wasn't just stronger, it was erratic, pushing at the truck in sharp jolts, as if trying to whisper something through metal and glass. The static on the radio deepened, cutting off the music mid-chorus before a mechanical voice broke through. Severe weather alert, tornado warning in effect for Pittsburgh, Haskell, and Latimer counties. Residents should seek shelter immediately. Repeat, this is a high-risk EF4 category storm system moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. Deshawn reached over, turning up the volume just slightly, his eyes narrowing toward the western horizon. That voice didn't rattle him. He'd lived through tornado seasons, driven through worse, but something about the way the clouds were crawling, twisting like coiled wire ready to snap, made his gut stir. There was a feeling in the air, a pressure, a stillness, that no radar could measure. Ahead, about half a mile down the road, he spotted what looked like an old abandoned gas station. The sign was broken, hanging by one chain, and the windows were boarded up, but the overhang looked sturdy enough, and if the winds turned violent, it might be the best place around for miles to ride out a storm. He checked his mirrors, eased onto the shoulder, and guided the truck into the lot, tires crunching over gravel and debris. He killed the engine but left the key in. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, fat, scattered, slow, as if the sky was still deciding whether to cry or scream. Deshawn stepped out, the wind catching the edge of his cap, and scanned the horizon again. A farmer's weather sense. That's what his daddy called it. You don't need satellites when your bones can tell you trouble's coming. And his bones were humming now. Then, just as he turned to climb back into the truck, he froze. There it was. So faint he almost missed it. A sound. No, a voice. Muffled, strained. Somewhere down the embankment across the road, past a line of bent fencing and overgrown grass, something was calling out. Not loud, not clear, but desperate. Sean narrowed his eyes. He stepped out into the gravel lot, listening. Another gust of wind whipped past, carrying with it the unmistakable clatter of metal, and a cry. Faint, childlike. "Help! Someone! Please!" Without hesitation he stepped into the wind and rain, following the voice, boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground as he crossed the road. His eyes scanned the field, and then he saw it. A large silver travel trailer, overturned, wheels twisted up like the legs of a dead animal, crushed at the base of a shallow ditch. Its back end was cracked open, windows shattered. Smoke, or maybe dust, curled into the air like breath from an open wound. One of its side doors was bent inward, the metal warped from impact. Deschamps didn't move for a beat, not from fear but calculation. He measured the distance, the damage, the weather. The sky behind him was darkening fast, turning green-gray, a sickly color he'd seen before, just before the wind came alive. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Someone was trapped, and he was the only soul around. He rolled up his sleeves, spat once into the wind, and climbed down the ditch toward the wreck. The rain began to fall harder, as if the sky was trying to stop him, but Deschamps Carter didn't stop for storms. Not when someone was calling out from the wreckage. Not when it was time to act. Not now. Deschamps braced himself as he stepped into the ditch, boots sinking deeper into the wet soil with each stride. The twisted trailer loomed before him, a mangled shell of what was once a home on wheels. Sheets of aluminum siding flapped violently in the wind like tattered flags, and one of the wheels, still spinning slowly, creaked in protest as it hung suspended in the air. The stench of fuel and dirt filled his nostrils. He moved with urgency, but not panic. His years as a firefighter had taught him that chaos demanded clarity, not adrenaline. Reaching the shattered side door, he crouched low, peering into the wreckage. The inside was barely lit, the only illumination coming from the gray light bleeding through the broken windows. A man's groan echoed faintly, followed by a soft whimper. There was blood smeared on the counter near the kitchenette, and glass crunching under Deschamps' boots as he crawled in, gripping a jagged edge for balance. The trailer had landed on its side, and the layout was a mess of broken furniture, luggage, and personal effects, scattered like confetti after a nightmare parade. "Hey!" he called out, voice steady but loud enough to cut through the rising howl of wind. "Is anyone here? I'm here to help." From the far end of the trailer, a girl's voice, trembling and small, answered back. "We're here. My dad. He's hurt. I think he's bleeding bad." Deschamps moved toward the sound, maneuvering carefully over an upturned table. He found her huddled beneath a splintered cabinet, a small blonde girl no older than 10, arms wrapped around a man's shoulders. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her knuckles white from gripping his jacket. The man beside her, middle-aged, wearing a navy blazer torn at the sleeve, was pale and slumped, his eyes fluttering. Blood trickled down his temple, matting his gray hair. Deschamps dropped to one knee. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, checking the man's pulse with his fingers. "Ellie," she whispered, trying not to cry again. "My dad's William. He hit his head. I couldn't get the door open." Deschamps nodded. "Okay, Ellie. I need you to be brave for just a little longer. I'm going to get you both out, all right?" Ellie bit her lip and nodded. Deschamps worked quickly, checking the man's vitals. Pulse, weak but present, breathing, shallow. A gash over the forehead, maybe a concussion. Not safe to move too much, but they couldn't stay. Outside, the wind was rising again, and with it the pitch of the storm sirens in the distance. Somewhere far off, the unmistakable train roar sound of a second funnel cloud was taking shape. Then, from the front end of the trailer, a third voice groaned, a deep, wet cough. Deschamps turned. A man, likely the trailer's driver, was half-pinned under a collapsed cabinet, his legs twisted awkwardly beneath a metal shelf that had fallen with the trailer's impact. He was older, maybe mid-50s, and unconscious, though his chest rose and fell with erratic rhythm. Deshawn exhaled sharply. 3 people, 1 seriously injured, 1 unconscious, 1 child, 1 man to carry them all, and a tornado coming. He looked to Ellie. "You stay close to me. Don't let go of my jacket." He lifted William first, careful to support the man's neck, and half-carried, half-dragged him toward the crumpled exit. Ellie followed, crawling on hands and knees through the slanted hallway. Rain now pelted the exposed side of the trailer like gravel. Thunder cracked hard and fast, shaking the very air. Deshawn got William out and laid him gently beneath the shallow overhang of a nearby drainage pipe, wrapping him in a spare blanket from his truck, which he sprinted to and returned with in seconds. Then he turned back for the driver. The trailer groaned as the wind slammed against its side again. Time was evaporating. Using a crowbar from his cab, Deshawn pried the shelving off the man's legs, grimacing as he felt the bone give way beneath the weight, definitely broken. He hauled the man onto his back, gritting his teeth, and trudged back through the mud, shoulders burning. Ellie held the blanket open, trying her best to help as Deshawn set the man down beside William, now slightly conscious, muttering incoherent words. Then the wind shifted. The pressure dropped in Deshawn's ears, like the bottom falling out of the world. He looked up. Over the distant hills, a funnel cloud was descending fast, huge, black and merciless. Trees bent and snapped, power lines sparked. Deshawn knew they had seconds, not minutes. "Truck, now," he ordered Ellie, scooping her up and sprinting. He opened the passenger side of his rig, shoved her in, then pulled both injured men with every ounce of strength toward the lee side of the vehicle, laying them down in the narrow space between the truck's cab and a concrete ditch. He threw his own body over them, using the bulk of the Peterbilt as a barrier, and wrapped his arms around Ellie as she buried her face in his chest. The tornado hit the field just 100 yards away, ripping a barn clean off its foundation, scattering tin and timber like leaves. The noise was beyond sound, an unholy scream that tore across the land. Deshawn didn't flinch. He held tight, anchored not by strength alone but by resolve. This wasn't the first storm to try and knock him down, and it wouldn't be the one to break him. The storm raged like a living beast, clawing at the earth with invisible fingers, howling through the sky with the rage of 1,000 voices. Deshawn lay pressed against the cold metal of his truck's cab, muscles clenched, heart thundering beneath his ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of responsibility. His body shielded Ellie, who trembled against him, face buried into his jacket, hands gripping his shirt like a lifeline. His arms curled around her instinctively, holding tight not just to keep her safe, but to remind her that she wasn't alone. Behind him, the 2 men, one groaning, one unconscious, lay in the cradle of mud and steel, protected from flying debris only by the bulk of the Peterbilt and Deshawn's determination not to let anyone die today. Seconds felt like hours. The funnel cloud roared past, carving a trail of destruction not more than 100 feet away. Debris clanged off the truck's frame, wooden planks, shards of glass, a street sign that struck the side mirror and snapped it clean off. The force of the wind rocked the truck on its axles, the ground beneath them quivering like a drumskin. But through it all, Deshawn did not move. He whispered quietly into Ellie's ear, steady and low, "Almost through, just hold on, I got you." And then, as sudden as it had come, the wind began to relent. The howling receded into a distant moan. Rain still fell, but softer now, like a shiver rather than a scream. The tornado moved northward, its fury spent, leaving in its wake a scarred field and a stunned silence broken only by the soft sob of a child and the rattling breath of a man who had just brushed death's doorstep. Deshawn exhaled for the first time in minutes. He gently lifted Ellie's face, her cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. "You all right, baby girl?" She nodded, barely. Her lower lip quivered, but her eyes met his with something stronger than fear. Trust. "You stayed," she whispered. "You didn't leave us." He gave her the faintest smile. "Never planned to." He rose slowly, checking the others. William was semi-conscious now, eyelids fluttering as he tried to sit up, wincing as pain lanced through his side. The driver was still out cold but breathing more steadily. Deschamps moved back to his cab, grabbed a first aid kit and bottles of water, then returned to check their wounds. He cleaned William's forehead with gentle precision, wrapping gauze where the bleeding had slowed, and splinted the driver's leg as best he could with a broken piece of shelving and the belt from his own pants. Every movement was practiced, efficient, and silent, like a man who had done this before, and never forgot the ones he couldn't save. The faint wail of sirens rose in the distance, coming closer. The cavalry was finally arriving. Deschamps stood in the rain, his hands coated in blood and dirt, and looked out over the wreckage. The trailer was gone, flattened like a soda can. The field around them was littered with shards of someone's life, a stuffed bear, a broken pair of glasses, a framed photo half submerged in the mud. He reached down, picked it up, and wiped the glass. It was a picture of William and Ellie, smiling on the steps of what looked like a government building. Deschamps blinked. Something familiar in the man's face clicked into place. That's when William, groggy but alert now, looked up and spoke hoarsely. "You? You saved us. What's your name?" Deschamps hesitated, then simply said, "Deschamps Carter." The name hung in the air for a moment. William's eyes widened faintly. You're not with emergency services?" Deschamps shook his head. "Just a truck driver passing through." William looked stunned. "You carried me. You pulled us all out of that. I thought no one was coming." Deschamps shrugged. "Didn't seem right to keep driving." The sirens drew closer, and soon the flashing lights of paramedics and police vehicles spilled onto the muddy road. EMTs rushed in, assessing the injured, ushering Ellie into a warm blanket, placing the driver onto a stretcher. One paramedic offered to check Deschamps' arm, which was torn and bleeding from where he'd caught a sharp edge in the trailer, but he waved them off. "Help the others first," he said simply. William gripped Deschamps' forearm before being lifted onto a gurney. "Please," he said, voice urgent, "let me repay you, whatever you need. Just say it." Deschamps looked at him, this man in the suit, battered and bloodied, eyes full of genuine gratitude. He could have said yes, could have asked for money or favors or even just a ride home, but instead he smiled faintly and said, "Just make sure she's all right." He nodded toward Ellie. And with that, as the responders focused their attention elsewhere, Deschamps returned to his truck. He didn't wait for recognition or applause. He didn't even tell them where he was headed. He started the engine, rolled the window down just far enough to hear the wind rustling through the wreckage behind him, and pulled away, his headlights cutting through the mist as quietly as he had come. By the time the medics realized he was gone, Deschamps was already halfway down the next county road, disappearing into the rain with no name badge, no spotlight, and no need for either. He didn't know that within hours the camera from the farmhouse across the field would upload its footage automatically, that someone would recognize the man in the truck, that the world would soon know the name he never thought would matter. He was just doing what he believed was right, and for Deschamps Carter that was always enough. 3 days passed. The storm that had torn through the eastern counties of Oklahoma left behind a trail of broken homes, uprooted trees, and stories, some of tragedy, others of survival. But one story in particular began to ripple quietly through the community, gaining momentum like an ember catching wind. It started as whispers in a shelter line, then as a photo shared on a local Facebook group. A grainy image taken from a security camera perched atop a farmhouse overlooking the field where the silver trailer had fallen. The footage showed a tall black man pulling 2 injured passengers from a mangled car, one after another, then shielding a child with his own body as the tornado roared past in the distance. No badge, no uniform, no press. Just courage, raw and unadorned. The video spread, first among neighbors, then across towns. By the 4th morning, local news stations had picked it up, dubbing the mystery figure the Man in the Storm. Commentators marveled at the act. Who was he? Why did he leave? The only identifying mark visible was the side of his truck. Peterbilt 389, midnight blue. With a missing passenger mirror and a dented step rail, people began scanning highways, sharing stories at truck stops, tagging trucking forums. Still, Deschamps remained exactly where he had always been, on the move, hauling freight from county to county, unaware his name was becoming something others carried on their lips like a prayer. But William Carraway knew. He had seen the man's face up close, felt the strength in his arms, the steadiness in his voice. The name, DeShawn Carter, had stayed with him, echoing through the blur of hospital rooms and concussion headaches. As soon as he was able, he had his staff run the plates, confirm the truck, and when he saw the video, the weight of it hit him in the chest. Not just the image of his daughter Ellie clinging to that man, but the way DeShawn had vanished afterward without so much as a phone number or request for thanks. William Carraway was not just a father. He was a senior state senator with 25 years of public service under his belt, a man who had given speeches in every county in Oklahoma, shaken hands at every fair and stood behind every podium, but he had never once been rescued. Not like that. Not by a stranger who asked for nothing. And that, he decided, had to be known. The auditorium in Tulsa was packed to capacity. It was the first statewide address since the storm, an event meant to rally recovery efforts, raise awareness, and honor first responders. Cameras rolled, media lined the aisles, and the state seal hung above the stage in quiet authority. Senator Carraway stood at the podium, still bearing a scar above his brow, his suit slightly loose after days of IV drips and hospital meals. He cleared his throat once, looked out over the crowd, and began. "I've stood at this podium many times in my life," he said, voice steady. "But today is different, because today I'm not here as a senator. I'm here as a father, who lived to hold his daughter again because of one man." The room fell still. He gestured to the screen behind him. The video played. DeShawn pulling Ellie from the wreck, DeShawn lifting the unconscious driver, DeShawn covering them with his body as the storm screamed overhead. "That man," William continued, voice tightening, as if named DeShawn Carter. A truck driver, a stranger, a man no one sent, no one paid, no one commanded. He showed up when no one else could. And he didn't just pull us from that wreck. He stood between us and death. And when it was over, he refused any reward. He didn't even wait for thanks. A pause, then applause. It started slow, uncertain, then grew into a standing ovation. People wept, others nodded silently, hands over hearts. In that moment, DeShawn Carter became more than a name. He became a reminder. William continued. "We give awards to heroes, but too often we forget the quiet ones, the ones who don't wear uniforms or hold titles. I propose we change that, today, by executive order of this office and in recognition of an act of extraordinary bravery and selflessness, the state of Oklahoma hereby awards Mr. DeShawn Carter the Medal of Civil Valor, our highest civilian honor." He held up the medal, silver, gleaming, carved with an oak tree bracing against wind. "And if Mr. Carter can hear this, wherever he is, I want him to know, my family owes you everything, and this state is proud to say your name." The image of DeShawn, still and resolute in the video, froze on the screen as the audience remained standing, many wiping their eyes. Across the country, the clip went viral. Hashtags like DeShawn the Brave, Oklahoma Hero, and Man in the Storm surged across social platforms. Drivers who passed a midnight blue Peterbilt began honking in salute. Strangers left thank you notes at rest stops. Some painted murals on walls in Tulsa and Muskogee. Others named him in prayer. But DeShawn didn't know any of that yet. Because at that moment he was on a stretch of highway outside Amarillo, eating a peanut butter sandwich in his cab, parked beneath the amber glow of a truck stop sign, humming softly to a gospel tune on the radio, with no idea that the name he thought no one would remember was now etched into the heart of a nation. The letter came 2 weeks later, folded neat and official, tucked inside a plain white envelope addressed in black ink to a truck stop in Stillwater where DeShawn had forwarded his mail through a friend. It bore the seal of the state and a handwritten note clipped to the top. "Please come. We'd be honored." At first, DeShawn stared at it in silence, hands calloused and still stained faintly with grease from changing a flat that morning. He wasn't a man for ceremonies or cameras. He didn't own a suit. Didn't much care for standing in front of strangers or being called things he never called himself. Hero, savior, angel. He wasn't any of those. He was just a man who heard someone call for help and answered. That's all. That's always been enough. But something about the letter gave him pause. Maybe it was the sincerity in the handwriting. Maybe it was the faint scent of lavender on the paper, reminding him of his mother's Sunday dress when she used to stand in the doorway, waiting for him to come home from school. Maybe it was the way Ellie's voice still echoed in his head, soft and fragile. You stayed. Whatever it was, it pulled him back toward the road, this time not to escape, but to be seen, even if only once, for what he did when no one was watching. The hall was full again. Tulsa's Civic Center gleamed beneath stage lights and banners of rebuilding, lined with rows of volunteers, survivors, officers, firefighters, and families clutching printed programs like keepsakes. At the center, a single chair sat reserved, the card on it reading Deshawn Carter. For a while, people wondered if he would come at all. Even William, now fully recovered and standing tall in a navy blue suit, scanned the crowd with hopeful eyes, unsure if the man who saved his life would let the world thank him properly. And then, just before the ceremony began, the side doors opened, quietly, unannounced. Deshawn stepped inside. He wore his cleanest jeans, a button-down shirt the color of dusk, and boots that had walked more miles than most people drive in a year. His jacket was faded but zipped up all the way, and in his hand he held a small notebook, the kind he used to jot down directions and miles, now folded open to reveal the words of the speech they'd asked him to give, just in case he found the voice to speak them. The audience turned. Slowly, respectfully, no applause, no gasps, just silence, and then rising to their feet one by one, not in fanfare but reverence, not for a celebrity, but for a man they had only seen in shadow, now stepping into light. He took the stage beside Senator Caraway, who reached out but didn't embrace him, just pressed a hand to Deshawn's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." Deshawn nodded. No words yet, just breath, deep and quiet, like the moment before sunrise. The medal was presented, and Deshawn took it with hands that trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything that came before, the nights on the road, the storm survived, the moments he thought no one saw him, and maybe never would. Then he stepped to the mic, cleared his throat once, looked down at the notebook, then slowly closed it. He didn't need it. "I'm not much for talkin'," he said, voice low but firm, "and I ain't used to being called things like hero. I drive a truck, I haul freight, I keep my head down and do the job. That's who I am. But that day, I heard a voice, a little girl, scared and alone, and I thought about all the times I was a kid wishing someone would come running. So I did." The room was still, even the air seemed to hold its breath. "I didn't stay 'cause I wanted something. I stayed 'cause we're supposed to. We're supposed to look out for each other, even when no one's watching, especially then." He paused, hands resting gently on the edge of the podium. "I didn't save that family to be remembered. But I hope if this story gets told, folks remember one thing. There's always time to do the right thing. Always." He stepped back. No dramatic finish, no swelling music. Just truth, plain-spoken and powerful. The room stood again, this time not out of awe but out of recognition. They saw in him not just a savior, but themselves, at their best. Later, as the crowd filtered out and speeches gave way to handshakes and laughter, a small voice called to him from across the room, "Mr. Deshawn." It was Ellie, now in a bright yellow dress, clutching a framed photo in her arms. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist without hesitation. He knelt down to her level, and she held out the frame. It was a drawing, crayon and pencil. A big blue truck shielding 3 small stick figures from a storm. At the top, in shaky handwriting, it read, "My hero has a truck." Deshawn's throat tightened. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You keep drawing, all right?" he said, voice thick. "You're going to do big things." She smiled and nodded. That night he left Tulsa under a sky newly scrubbed clean by rain, the stars coming out like blessings scattered across black velvet. He drove east, no destination in mind, his medal tucked in the glove box beside his mother's old Bible and a candy bar Ellie had given him before he left. On the radio, a host recounted the story of the man in the storm, and Deshawn shook his head with a wry smile, turning the volume down low. He didn't need the world to remember his name. But it did. And that for the first time in a long time felt like enough. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.